In our last episode, a powder blue Chevrolet sat abandoned on a fog-covered highway. The woman who drove it, 23-year-old Sienna Ray, had simply vanished. But before she became a headline, she was someone's teacher, someone's neighbor, and maybe someone's secret. Tonight, we uncover the woman behind the mystery, and follow her final hours before she disappears. Before the night she vanished, before her name filled newspapers across Oregon, Sienna Ray lived what seemed like a simple, peaceful life. In the small seaside town of Gabaldi, she was known as the young teacher who made learning feel like an adventure. Each morning, the same scene unfolded: a modest blue cottage on Cedar Street, the faint smell of sea salt drifting through lace curtains, and Sienna stepped onto the porch with a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. Neighbors often waved as she walked to school, always on time, always smiling. To the townspeople, she was kindness made visible. At Gabaldi Elementary, her classroom walls were covered in maps, watercolor paintings, and handmade crafts. Her second graders adored her, especially when she told stories about faraway countries and underwater cities. Miss Ray said the ocean keeps secrets, one former student recalled decades later. I guess she was right. She sang in the church choir, volunteered at the library, and helped organize reading drives for children. To everyone who knew her, Sienna Ray was not just a teacher, she was a quiet source of light. But what no one knew was that her life before Gabaldi was a closed door, one she never wanted anyone to open. She had arrived in town in August of 1965, driving an old Chevrolet with a single suitcase and a box of books. Her rental on Cedar Street was neat, almost too neat, not a trace of family photographs, no childhood keepsakes, not even a framed diploma. When asked about her past, she'd smile softly and say, "It's not very exciting." But there were cracks beneath the calm surface. Her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Collins, recalled seeing her porch light on well past midnight, the shadow of Sienna pacing the living room floor. And on quiet evenings, when fog rolled in from the Pacific, she'd sit by the window listening to static on her radio, as if waiting for a signal only she could understand. The few who grew close to her noticed a guardedness she couldn't quite hide. A colleague once asked if she missed her family. Sienna hesitated, then answered, almost to herself, "Some places, you don't go back to, even if you could." No one thought much of it at the time. But years later, that single line would resurface in police notes, a haunting clue that Sienna might have been running from something long before she disappeared. In her final weeks, those close to her sensed a quiet fear. She started locking her doors, something no one in Gabaldi did back then. She stopped taking her walks along the beach. And one night, she asked a fellow teacher a question that would chill her to remember later. Do you ever feel like someone's following you, even when you can't see anyone there? Whatever Sienna Ray feared, it had already found her. November 12, 1966. The night Gabaldi came alive for its annual Harvest Festival, a tradition older than the town itself. Pumpkins lined the steps of the community hall, lanterns flickered in the windows, and the scent of baked apples filled the cold air. It was the kind of night when everyone showed up, and everyone remembered exactly where they were. That evening, Sienna Ray arrived alone. Witnesses recalled she looked radiant, dressed in a forest green dress and a simple gold necklace, her dark hair pinned up neatly. She greeted her fellow teachers, exchanged warm smiles with parents, and joined a group near the bandstand. For a few hours, she seemed like herself again, dancing, laughing, free from whatever shadows had followed her the past few weeks. She looked happy, one colleague later said. But it wasn't the kind of happy you feel. It was the kind you wear, like a mask. At around 10:15 p.m., the tone shifted. Sienna was seen standing near the punch table, speaking in low tones with Walter Grayson, the high school science teacher. They weren't friends, not exactly. Witnesses described their conversation as intense, though no one could hear what was said. At one point, she placed her hand on his arm, not affectionately, but in emphasis, and he nodded quickly, glancing toward the exit. Within half an hour, Sienna checked her wristwatch, smiled politely to those nearby, and said, "See you at church tomorrow." Those would be the last words anyone in Gabaldi would ever hear her say. By 11 p.m., the festival was winding down. The band played its final song, couples collected coats, and laughter spilled into the night air. Sienna's Chevrolet was later spotted heading north along the coastal highway, her headlights vanishing into fog. The next morning, she never showed up for church. And by Monday, when she didn't appear for class, concern turned into alarm. When officers arrived at her home that evening, they found her cottage perfectly in order. Her bed made, dishes clean, and her lesson plan for Monday still open on her desk. But her weekend bag, and Sienna herself, were gone. Just hours later, Deputy Frank Morales responded to a call about an abandoned car a few miles outside town. A powder blue Chevrolet. Engine running. Door ajar. Inside, her purse sat on the passenger seat, untouched. In the grass nearby, a single shoe. That night, Gabaldi changed forever. A small town built on trust suddenly found itself staring into an empty road, and a mystery no one could explain. Because Sienna Ray didn't just disappear. She was erased. She was running from something, or someone, long before that night. And soon, investigators would find the first clue she left behind. A letter. Hidden in her cottage. One she wrote, but never sent. Subscribe and stay with us. Because in episode 3, the words inside that letter will reveal a truth darker than anyone imagined.